The gay-haired man bowed his head, his calloused hands trembling slightly in handcuffs. "Defendant's name?" the clerk asked. "Royce Banner, Medical Sergeant, Honest Marine Division." He replied. The prosecutor stared at him, 1 second, 2 seconds, then suddenly stood at attention. The courtroom fell silent. If that moment made you pause, 1 like and 1 subscribe mean 1,000 thank yous to those who have silently protected this nation. The evening chill settled over the city as Royce Banner ranged his few possessions. Behind whose laundromat, 8 cardboard boxes, stacked neatly, contained everything he owned, medals he couldn't bear to sell, medical textbooks too outdated to be worth anything, and a faded photograph of 3 smiling children who no longer recognized him. At 68, Royce's body betrayed his years of service. His right knee locked when the weather changed, and his hands, once steady enough to stitch wounds under artillery fire, now trembled slightly from nerve damage. The construction accident 5 years ago had taken more than his livelihood. The medical bills had taken his home. The depression had taken his marriage. But nothing could take his training. Every Tuesday, Royce walked for miles to the VA bus stop where younger veterans gathered for transport to the medical center. He never boarded. His paperwork was still pending after 3 years, but he watched over them silently, a guardian no one had asked for. That evening, Royce noticed a young man in a worn army jacket pacing nervously at the bus stop. The signs were unmistakable to someone who'd treated combat trauma for decades. Dilated pupils, hypervigilance, trembling hands. When the young veteran suddenly dropped to the sidewalk, body convulsing in a seizure, Royce was at his side in seconds. "You're all right, soldier. I've got you," Royce said, gently turning him on his side, protecting his head from the concrete. "Help," he shouted toward the upscale restaurant across the street. A waiter stepped inside, whispering to the manager. No one approached. "I need help now," Royce shouted louder, his voice carrying the command presence of someone used to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. "This man is having a seizure." The restaurant manager emerged, phone in hand, not calling an ambulance, but the police. "There's a homeless man causing a disturbance," he said into the phone. "He's screaming at customers. Yes, he looks unstable." When the police arrived minutes later, they found Royce still kneeling beside the young veteran, who was now semi-conscious. "Sir, you need to step away," the first officer commanded. "He's post-seizure, possibly PTSD triggered," Royce explained, not moving. "He needs medical attention." "Not police. Step away now," the officer repeated, hand moving to his taser. Royce looked up, recognizing the futility of resistance. He slowly rose, hands visible. "I'm a combat medic. I'm trying to help him." The second officer snorted. "Sure you are, buddy." When they asked for ID, Royce had none to offer. When they asked for his address, he had none to give. The young veteran, now alert enough to mumble "Thanks," was released to wait for his VA transport. Royce was handcuffed and placed in the patrol car. "You can't just disturb the peace and threaten people," the officer said as they drove away. Royce didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that some battles couldn't be won with words. The holding cell smelled of despair and cheap disinfectant. Royce sat silently as men around him protested their innocence or slept off their intoxication. When morning came, he was led to the courtroom for arraignment, still wearing yesterday's clothes, a faded flannel shirt too large for his frame, and jeans worn thin at the knees. The public defender barely glanced at him before the hearing. "Plead guilty to disturbing the peace. First offense, they'll probably just give you community service." "I was helping a veteran having a seizure," Royce said quietly. The lawyer sighed, checking his watch. "Look, they've got witnesses saying you were shouting and scaring customers. Just take the deal." Royce straightened his shoulders slightly, a ghost of military bearing visible beneath the weariness. "I don't make deals when I've done nothing wrong." His court-appointed lawyer rolled his eyes. "Your funeral, old-timer." The morning sunlight streamed through the high windows of courtroom 3, casting long rectangles of brightness across the worn wooden benches. Royce Banner sat alone in the defendant's section, his posture straight despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. The handcuffs had been removed, but he held his wrists together as if they were still there. Docket number 279B, City vs. Banner, Royce E. Charges of disturbing the peace, resisting an officer's commands, and public nuisance, announced the clerk in a monotone that suggested she'd read similar charges a dozen times already. Today. Judge Eleanor Winters peered over her reading glasses. Counsel present. A young prosecutor in a crisp navy suit stood. Logan Myers for the city, Your Honor. Logan Myers had been with the district attorney's office for just under 3 years. At 32, he carried himself with the confidence of someone determined to climb the ladder quickly. His cases against the city's homeless population had a 97% conviction rate, a statistic he made sure his superiors noticed. Mr. Banner appears to be. Judge Winters paused, looking for the public defender, representing himself, apparently. Myers offered, glancing at his notes. The judge frowned. Mr. Banner, you understand you're entitled to legal representation. If you cannot afford an attorney, I understand my rights, Your Honor, Royce interrupted, his voice soft but clear. I'll represent myself. Very well. How do you plead to the charges? Not guilty. Logan Myers approached the bench with practiced ease. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. The defendant was causing a disturbance outside Calino's restaurant yesterday evening. He was shouting, frightening patrons, and refused direct orders from responding officers to cease and desist. We have 3 witnesses prepared to testify, including the restaurant manager. The judge nodded. Mr. Banner, anything to add before? We set a trial date. Royce stood slowly, his bad knee evident in his careful movement. I was rendering medical assistance to a veteran suffering from a PTSD-triggered seizure. I called for help because no one responded, and you're qualified to render such assistance, the judge asked skeptically. I served as a medical sergeant with the Honest Marine Division, MUM, 3 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I was trained to handle combat trauma and psychiatric emergencies. Logan Myers consulted his notes with a frown. We have no verification of the defendant's military service, Your Honor, and there's no record of any seizure victim at the solicitado when officers arrived. He was conscious by then, Royce explained. They let him go to catch his VA transport. Convenient, Myers remarked with subtle sarcasm. Your Honor, the defendant has no fixed address, no identification, and a history of mental instability according to previous police encounters. We believe he poses an ongoing risk to public safety and recommend community service with a restraining order preventing him from returning to that business district. The judge turned to Royce. Mr. Banner, do you have anyone who can verify your story? The alleged seizure victim, perhaps. Royce's weathered face remained impassive. I don't know his name, Your Honor, but I know what I saw and what I did. You shouted and frightened an entire restaurant of people, Myers countered. The responding officers reported that you were aggressive and uncooperative. I took an oath, Royce said quietly, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the courtroom. I swore I would never again let someone die under my watch. An uncomfortable silence fell over the courtroom. The judge looked troubled. But before she could respond, a voice came from the back of the courtroom. Excuse me, Your Honor, called an elderly woman with silver hair. May I speak? This is a formal proceeding, Mum. Unless you're a witness, I think I might be, the woman insisted. Standing with the help of a cane. Did you say Banner? Royce Banner from the Marines? Royce turned, confusion evident on his face. He didn't recognize the woman. I remember that name from the papers years ago, she continued. There was an ambush in Fallujah. He saved an entire squad, carried one of them on his back for nearly a quarter-mile under fire. Logan Myers shook his head. Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the current charges. Perhaps, the judge conceded. But it speaks to character. Ma'am, unless you witnessed yesterday's events, I'll have to ask you to be seated. As the woman reluctantly sat down, Logan glanced again at his case notes. Among the sparse details was a line he'd initially overlooked. Background claims military. Service, Banner, Royce E., Medical Sergeant, USMC, Mosul deployments 2004 to 2007. A memory stirred. A story his father had told him countless times throughout his childhood about a medical sergeant. who had refused to leave anyone behind, about the man who carried his father through a hail of bullets after an ambush, about the reason Logan had grown up with a father when 7 other children from his father's unit had not. If you ever meet a man named Royce Banner, son, you tell him Richard Myers still talks about him. You tell him I owe him my life. Logan stared at the defendant with new eyes, the courtroom suddenly feeling airless. Could this homeless man, this disheveled figure the system was ready to discard, be the same person his father had called a hero? The timing matched, the deployment matched, the rank matched. Your Honor, Logan found himself saying, the prosecution requests a brief recess. On what grounds, Mr. Myers? Logan hesitated, his professional trajectory and personal history suddenly in conflict. New information relevant to the case has come to light. I need 30 minutes to verify it. The judge checked her watch with visible impatience. 15 minutes, counselor. Not a second more. As the bailiff called recess, Logan rushed from the courtroom, phone already in hand, dialing his father's number with trembling fingers. Dad, it's Logan. I need to ask you something important. Richard Myers had been enjoying his morning coffee on the porch of his suburban home, the spring sunshine warming his aging bones. At 65, he still maintained the discipline of his military days, up at dawn, bed made with hospital corners, daily physical therapy for the leg that had never fully healed. What's wrong, son? You sound strange. Logan paced the courthouse corridor, lowering his voice. Dad, I'm working a case. A homeless man, disturbing the peace, claims he's a Marine Corps medic, says his name is Royce Banner. The silence that followed was so complete that Logan checked his phone to ensure the call hadn't dropped. Dad, are you there, Banner? His father's voice had changed, acquired a reverence Logan had rarely heard. Royce Banner, you're sure that's the name? Yes, older guy, maybe late 60s. Says he served in Fallujah and Mosul. Logan, listen to me carefully. The casual tone was gone from his father's voice. That's him. That's the man I told you about. The one who saved your unit. Logan finished, feeling a chill despite the overheated courthouse air. The one who carried you to the medevac. Not just carried me, son. He fought through 300 meters of active gunfire with me on his back. 7 men were dead. I had shrapnel in my femoral artery. The chopper couldn't land any closer because of our PG fire. Richard's voice grew thick with emotion. The doctor said I had maybe 2 minutes before I would have bled out. He got me there with 30 seconds to spare. Logan leaned against the wall, the weight of realization hitting him. Why didn't he say anything? I'm literally prosecuting him. And he didn't mention knowing you. That's Banner, Richard said simply. He never took credit, not even when they tried to give him a silver star. Said he was just doing his job. There was a pause. Logan, what's he charged with? Disturbing the peace. He was shouting for help outside a restaurant, says a younger vet was having a seizure. Richard's laugh was bitter. Of course he was still saving people while the rest of us just walked by. Another pause. What happens now? Logan checked his watch. The recess was nearly over. I don't know, Dad. I'm supposed to be prosecuting him. Then don't. The steel in Richard Myers' voice was unmistakable. You find a way to drop those charges. That man is the reason you had a father growing up. The reason I was there for your birthdays and graduation and wedding. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Richard interrupted. Some debts can never be repaid. But by God, we try. You tell him. Tell him I kept the promise. What promise? He'll know. When Logan re-entered courtroom 3, he felt as though he were seeing everything through new eyes. The judge checking her docket, the bored bailiff, the row of defendants waiting their turn, and Royce Banner sitting quietly with the dignity of a man who expected nothing from the world but would still give it everything. The court will now resume. Mr. Myers, have you resolved your inquiry? Logan approached the bench, his decision already made. Your Honor, may I have a word with the defendant before we proceed? Judge Winters raised an eyebrow but nodded her consent. Logan walked directly to Royce, extending his hand. Mr. Banner, my name is Logan Myers. My father is Richard Myers, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Royce's weathered face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or simply surprise at hearing a familiar unit designation. Fallujah, 2004. Logan continued quietly. You carried him to the medevac after an ambush. You saved his life. Royce studied Logan's face, seeing perhaps the echo of the young Marine he'd once known. How is your father? The question, so normal, so human after years of being treated as invisible, almost undid Logan's professional composure. He's well, still fighting with the VA about his leg, but he coaches Little League and spoils my kids rotten. A ghost of a smile crossed Royce's face. Good, that's good. Logan returned to his position, but when the judge asked him to present the city's case, he straightened his shoulders and faced the bench. Your Honor, at this time, the city moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Banner. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Winters leaned forward. Mr. Myers, this is highly irregular. On what grounds? New evidence, Your Honor. Logan hesitated, then continued with firm resolve and a clear recognition that a grave injustice was about to be committed. Approached the bench. Counselor, as Logan explained in hushed tones, the judge's expression shifted from annoyance to surprise and finally to something approaching respect. She nodded once, then addressed the courtroom. Based on the prosecution's motion and the evidence presented, all charges against Royce Banner are hereby dismissed. She turned to Royce. Mr. Banner, you're free to go. Royce stood, seemingly unsurprised by this turn of events, as if good fortune was simply another burden to bear stoically. Your Honor, Logan said, before Mr. Banner leaves, there's something else. He turned to face the courtroom. 16 years ago in Fallujah, Iraq, an ambush claimed the lives of 7 U.S. Marines. 9 others were critically wounded. Medical Sergeant Royce Banner, despite being wounded himself, moved through enemy fire repeatedly to drag the injured to safety. When the medevac couldn't land near their position due to heavy fire, Sergeant Banner carried my father, then Corporal Richard Myers, over 300 meters through active enemy fire. The courtroom had fallen completely silent. My father survived because of his actions. I had a father because of Sergeant Banner's courage. Logan's voice grew stronger. Yet today, this decorated veteran stands before us, charged with disturbing the peace for trying once again to save a fellow soldier. Logan turned to Royce and did something that caused another murmur to ripple through the courtroom. He stood at attention and saluted. On behalf of the district attorney's office, the city, and, most importantly, the Myers family, I apologize for this disgraceful treatment. Royce slowly returned the salute, military bearing momentarily visible beneath. Years of hardship. The judge cleared her throat, visibly moved. Mr. Banner, would you like to address the court? Royce considered for a moment, then shook his head. No, Your Honor. I was just doing what I was trained to do. As Royce turned to leave, Logan called out, Sergeant Banner, my father wanted me to tell you he kept the promise. Royce froze, his back to the courtroom for a moment. His shoulders seemed to tremble. What promise was that, if I may ask? The judge inquired. Logan looked at Royce, who had turned back slightly. Their eyes met, and Royce gave a small nod of permission. When my father was being loaded onto the helicopter, Logan explained, he was convinced he was dying. He made Sergeant Banner promise to check on his family, his wife, an unborn child if he didn't make it. Sergeant Banner refused. Logan smiled slightly. He told my father, you're going to live, Marine, and you're going to keep that promise yourself. The courthouse steps felt different under Royce's feet as he descended them, a free man. The morning sun had given way to high noon, bright and unforgiving on the city streets. He paused, momentarily unsure of his direction. Freedom without purpose was just another kind of homelessness. Sergeant Banner, Royce turned to find Logan. Myers approaching, carrying a triangular wooden case beneath his arm. The young prosecutor had removed his suit jacket in the spring heat. His tie loosened slightly. Logan, please. He gestured to a bench beside the courthouse steps. Do you have a moment? Royce nodded, settling his aching body onto the hard surface, his knee protesting the movement. A familiar companion of pain. My father asked me to give you this. Logan handed over the wooden case. He's been keeping it for you. Royce accepted the case with careful hands. Inside, folded with military precision, lay an American flag, not just any flag. He recognized the slight burn mark on one corner, the discoloration along one edge. This was the flag from their forward operating base in Fallujah, the day after the ambush. Logan explained, "My father's commander gave him this flag," said. "It was for the families of the men who didn't make it back. Dad kept it safe all these years, waiting to find you." Royce ran weathered fingers over the fabric, memories washing over him, young faces, laughter in the desert heat, blood on his hands as he fought to save lives with inadequate supplies and dwindling hope. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly. "That's exactly what Dad said you'd say." Logan smiled. "And it's exactly why he insisted you should have it." A business card rested beneath the flag. "That's for the Veterans Justice Outreach Program. They help with housing, medical care, legal assistance. He's flying in tomorrow." Logan stood, extending his hand. "Can we offer you a ride somewhere?" Royce considered the question. Where did one go when nowhere was home? The VA Center on Madison. If it's not too much trouble, not at all. 1 week later, Royce Banner sat in a small office at the VA hospital, the flag case resting on his lap as he faced Dr. Daria Eleanor Voss, director of the Combat Medic Mentorship Program. "Your qualifications are exceptional, Mr. Banner. 3 Purple Hearts, combat experience in multiple theaters, and your actions in Fallujah are literally in our training materials." That was a lifetime ago, Doctor. Perhaps. But PTSD treatment has evolved significantly. And who better to help our younger veterans than someone who's walked that road? She leaned forward. "We need mentors who understand both the glory and the cost of service, people who can bridge the gap between military trauma and civilian recovery." For the first time in years, Royce felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Purpose, direction, the chance to serve again. "When do I start?" On a crisp autumn day 3 months later, Royce stood at the entrance of the VA Center, waiting. His appearance had transformed, hair neatly trimmed, clean-shaven, wearing a simple but dignified button-down shirt and slacks. A small pin on his collar identified him as part of the medical staff. A car pulled up, and Logan Myers emerged from the driver's side. He circled around to help his passenger, a man in his 60s with a pronounced limp and a cane. Richard Myers looked up at the man standing at the entrance, and time seemed to collapse between them. No words were exchanged as they approached each other. None were needed. The two veterans simply stood, facing one another, a lifetime of understanding passing between them in the silence. Then, with military precision, they rendered each other a perfect salute. Logan watched his father and the man who had saved him, standing together across generations of service and sacrifice. Some debts could never be repaid, but in recognition, there was healing. Some wounds are visible. Royce had told his PTSD support group the previous day. Others are carried in silence. Our job is to honor both. If that moment made you pause, a like and subscribe equals 1,000 thank yous to those who silently protected this country. Comment respect if you also don't want anyone to be forgotten.